Perfect.
Welcome to T4G Sports. Today we're going to talk about the SEC moving to 9 conference games. I think it's time. I think it's time for them to play 9 conference games like everyone else. The ACC can do it at once because the ACC is going to crumble. You could play 6 conference games and it's not going to change what's going to happen to the ACC. So the ACC I really don't care about. It's a matter of when they're going to crumble, not if they are going to crumble. But for the SEC, I really do believe the SEC should be forced to play 9 conference games like everyone else. What do you guys think? Let us know in the comments below. And with that being said, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, click the notification bell, and let's light it up. So I do think that the Big Ten and SEC will merge. I think Greg Sankey is an incredibly smart human being, and he knows what he's doing. And if you're Tony Petitti, I think Tony Petitti is incredibly smart too, because Tony Petitti is very silent, and that should scare people because he's very quiet. Tony Petitti, in my opinion, has been letting this all play out, and he's been knowing what the future holds. And the Big Ten has already sounded the alarm of saying, look, we are willing to merge with the SEC, but one of our requirements is you will play 9 conference games. And I don't think the Big Ten should back down from that because Greg Sankey will, of course, try to keep the 8 conference games. They're going to try to keep the neutral sites going. But I really think if you're the Big Ten, I think you need to put your foot down. And I think you need to tell them, look, it's better off if we merge together and we play equal opportunity. It's the same across the board for both of our conferences because no longer can you guys say that you play a tougher schedule than the Big Ten. It hasn't been proven for the last 2 years straight. The SEC is starting to just go downhill. You had the great Nick Saban retire out of nowhere before this started happening. You don't think he knew? You don't think Nick Saban knew this was going to happen? Guys, we said it like a month ago. We said it over a year ago that the SEC has been playing with these rules. We've talked about this before. People think that we just hate the SEC. That's what they think. That's not true at all. We hate the politics of the SEC because we know what they're doing. It's very obvious, and we'll walk you guys through this. And feel free, if you guys have a different opinion, to comment down below and tell us and argue the facts that we're giving you here. When college football playoff expands to 12 teams, I think you're going to see the SEC look more down to earth. And I don't mean that as in like they're just such nice people. I mean they're going to look like the other conferences, particularly the Big Ten, because you'll see Penn State go into the college football playoff, and everyone says Penn State's not that good. And Penn State is going to wreck some teams' entire existence. And that's what Penn State is. They're definitely good at it. They're the king of neutral sites. They play one less conference game. That helps you with recruiting. That helps you across the board. That helps get more of your teams into bowl games. And if you're the Big Ten, what do you know if you're Tony Petitti? Penn State's recruiting is going to jump up. The Big Ten's recruiting is going to keep getting better. Oregon, Ohio State, Penn State, they're not going anywhere. Michigan will be back. It's going to happen. They're going to be back. That's too big of a blue chip program to just fade away into the abyss. That's not going to happen. Then you still have USC, you have Wisconsin, you have Iowa, you have Minnesota, you have teams, Illinois, you have teams that are showing up and doing better. And I think if you're Tony Petitti, you need to keep demanding that of your teams in your conference. That, look, guys, Nebraska, you guys got to keep getting better. There's no more ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if Greg Sankey and the SEC want to play hardball, then I think if you're the Big Ten, you need to play hardball. I think if they don't go to 9 conference games, you need to say, okay, fine, now we're not going to merge and we're going to be competitors. And I don't think that's going to profit the SEC because you're not doing better in TV revenue sharing. You're not doing better in NIL. You're not beating our teams in those categories. The number 1 team in NIL, according to several different places, is Oregon. Ohio State's like 4th. And look at what they're doing. Ohio State was they averaged damn near a top 4 recruiting class every year, even beside NIL. They're not going anywhere. They have the biggest program that there is when it comes to when it comes to sports revenue. They make over $250 million a year. They have the biggest fan base on the planet. They're like tied with Michigan. They have the 2 biggest brands in college football sitting in their conference. So I think that you have much more power if you're the Big Ten than what the SEC would like to admit. Now, if things do go the opposite way, which is the Big Ten and the SEC are going to get into a competition with each other, which I don't think is going to happen. I really do believe Greg Sankey is smart enough to see the writing on the wall and go, look, we'll move to 9 conference games. We'll make it more fair. They're businessmen at the end of the day. A lot of fans want to think that this is going to be some kind of competition, and I just don't see it going that route. I mean, these are 2 incredibly smart humans. Also, if you look at Tony Petitti, he's incredibly smart, and it should scare people that he's so silent because he's very quiet, and he's just sitting there being very, very quiet and methodical and letting things play out, because I think Tony Petitti knows in his back pocket that if we have to get aggressive, it's not going to be so beneficial for the SEC. I don't think it will be. I think Tony Petitti knows that he could flex on him, and he can make this a competition that the SEC is just not going to like. It's not going to favor the SEC. And the reason I say that is because, for one, look at just the writing on the wall. And this is what we said years ago, okay? We talked about this, and people wanted to call us crazy, but the Big Ten consumes the Pac-12. What was the best of the Pac-12, okay? They wiped them out, basically, and then the Big 12 came and finished it off and cleaned the carcass of the Pac-12, and now it's like the Pac-2 or whatever the hell they are now. And then after that happened, you had CBS and NBC that came in with billions of dollars and said, we want to get in the ground floor. Why did they want to do that? Why would CBS and NBC flood in and say, we want to spend billions of dollars into this market, into the Big Ten conference? Why do we want to do that? Well, if you think about it, the Big Ten is the only national conference powerhouse. The SEC is known as a national brand, but they're not a national conference. The Big Ten owns coast to coast. And the Big Ten, you already know, the Big Ten is going to get in the Florida and Texas market in due time. You know that. You know that the ACC will collapse. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when they collapse. So when they collapse, you know that the Big Ten is going to get a big piece of that pie. There's no question about it. They look at the contracts that they signed. They signed a bigger deal with CBS, NBC, and Fox Sports than the SEC did with ESPN. ESPN basically owns the sole rights to the SEC, and ABC, which is owned by ESPN. So think about it. There's more TV networks. You have a bigger conference than the SEC. You're the only national conference. The SEC is not. And now when the ACC collapses, you know that you're going to be able to offer Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State, Miami. You're going to be able to offer them a lot of money. And the SEC is not going to be able to offer them more money. The SEC is also not going to be able to say, like, hey, the competition is going to be better in the SEC over the Big Ten, because like it's already proven these last 2 years, the SEC has taken hits. So Tony Petitti knows this. Greg Sankey knows this. So in reality, if the Big Ten wants to play hardball with the SEC, they could say, fine, we're going to go to 8 conference games. We're going to play cupcakes. Any teams that we play that are Power 4 opponents, that are non-conference opponents, we're going to play at neutral sites. We're going to do it just like the SEC does. We're not going to play it. We're not going to give them a home field advantage. And then we're going to play cupcakes, and we're going to fill the 12-team playoff with as many Big Ten teams as possible. And if you look at the NIL, Big Ten is not second to anyone. You have 2 of the biggest brands in college sports sitting in your backyard, Michigan and Ohio State. Ohio State makes the most money of any program in college sports. They pull in over $250 million in revenue per year. I mean, that is a lot of money. They're number 1 for a reason. Then you have Michigan. Then you got Penn State. Then you got Oregon. You got USC. You got some big, nasty brands sitting there. And when you get your fair share of, hey, I'm going to go after Clemson, I'm going to go after these other ACC teams, then what do you know it comes with that? You have a massive Notre Dame sitting there. All of Notre Dame's rivals are in the Big Ten. Notre Dame, in our opinion, we released a video on this probably over a year ago at this point in time, that we believe that Notre Dame already is going to join the Big Ten. There's already been talks with the Big Ten about joining them. So Notre Dame is looking to be in a great spot if they join the Big Ten. It makes sense. It just makes sense.
Now they're going to play hardball. They're going to make it very difficult for the Big Ten, and that's what they're going to do because that's Notre Dame, and that's how they operate. But at the end of the day, the Big Ten is the best place for them, and they can stay independent for as long as they want, but eventually in time, they're not going to even be able to play because the Big Ten and the SEC own the game.
But what they're waiting on is the ACC to collapse. Because if Notre Dame joins the Big Ten now, then it's curtains for everyone. Flat out curtains. And I don't think Notre Dame wants to be known as the nail in the coffin for college football. I think Notre Dame is smart enough to see we're going to wait for the ACC to collapse, and then when they collapse, we're going to have no other choice but to join the Big Ten. Because the problem for Notre Dame is having your independence is great, but you don't really have your independence. You're independently dependent on another conference like they are with the ACC since COVID. So when the ACC collapses, then who are you dependent on? Well, you're dependent really on the Big Ten or the SEC. Well, the SEC doesn't really have any of your rivals. And if the Big Ten wanted to play hardball and say, well, you can't play any of our teams unless you join our conference, then Notre Dame would really be stuck with the Big 12 or the SEC, and I think joining the SEC would not help their brand. I think people were shocked at how the SEC was not the most powerful conference in these last 2 years. I mean, when we did a video even years ago talking about how the Big Ten is going to keep getting bigger, people didn't believe us. And then, we did the video after the Tennessee game and we said the SEC got exposed. And this is something we've been talking about for a while. And a lot of people on there said, well, that's crazy. SEC is still the biggest and baddest conference. And then now, weeks later, Georgia loses. You're seeing the SEC struggle. I mean, this is your SEC champion, and they got dismantled against Notre Dame. They got dismantled. This was hideous, and that's your SEC champion. The only one who beat the Big Ten champion is another Big Ten team, which is still not good optics for the SEC. So I really do believe that then Notre Dame's going to join. The ACC teams, they're going to split. You're going to have some go to the SEC. But I think that the Big Ten is going to be a more shiny object for a lot of these teams. They're going to get in the Florida market. They're going to get into the Texas market. And then what's going to happen? The Big Ten's money is going to go even further. So I think if the Big Ten really wanted to play hardball, I don't think it's going to benefit the SEC. In my opinion, I think the SEC needs to come to grips with this. I think they will if Greg Sankey's smart about his options here. And I think he is an incredibly smart man. He's a businessman at the end of the day, and I think he's going to do it. But I think they must be forced to play 9 conference games. I think you must be forced to play a tougher schedule because you can't keep having your best teams in the SEC play each other in the regular season every 5 to 8 years. You can't do that anymore. It needs to be equal for the Big Ten and equal for the SEC because for a long time, the Big Ten shot themselves in the foot, and that's their fault. But now, with you expanding and allowing your teams to do more, not be stuck in a blender, Penn State's going to do better on recruiting. Indiana's going to do better on recruiting. Oregon's going to continue to shine. Ohio State's going to continue to shine. Michigan's going to continue to shine. They're going to get better and better and better. And then you have USC, you got Iowa, you got teams that are on the verge of being great that are going to start getting back to that. Nebraska's one of them as well. Wisconsin's another one of those as well. When those teams start to pick it up, you even have Illinois now coming out of the woodworks. It is only positives moving forward for the Big Ten, in our opinion. So I do think they must be forced to play 9 conference games. I think Greg Sankey is going to do that. I think he's smart, and I think it's going to make for exciting football. And I do believe that the SEC and the Big Ten will merge. The ACC will collapse. Notre Dame will also join the Big Ten, and it's going to make for exciting football. And I think they're probably going to end up making their own playoff, and they're going to own college sports. That's really what they're going to do. So let us know what you guys think down below.